Uprising 44 The Silent Shadows is a run-of-the-mill, middle-of-the-road, cover-based third-person shooter in many ways, but there are a few good things about it. Firstly, I really appreciate the focus on conserving ammunition and the small ammunition drops. There are no ammo boxes within the game, which means that you have to get all ammunition from downed enemies, meaning you have to put yourself at more risk strategically in order to grab ammunition so you can survive future firefights. Carefully maneuvering from downed enemy to downed enemy is also most of the reason you'll be moving at all in the game, as most of the time it's much easier to stick to cover until you realize that you do need ammunition. Secondly, bullet sponges don't exist. If you shoot an enemy in the head with any gun, he dies instantly, and he only takes a couple of bullets to the torso from any gun as well. Even shooting enemies in the legs will kill them quickly. This meshes well with the design philosophy of running over top of dead enemies to grab ammunition and a heavy focus on ammunition conservation. Basically, the game encourages you to fire smarter, not harder. On the other hand, some questionable but not necessarily bad features include your AI partners being almost impossible to kill, seeming almost superhuman in comparison to your player character. It's also the definition of corridor shooter in many places, and when it isn't a corridor shooter, it more resembles Time Crisis than most modern TPSs. I do quite enjoy popping in and out of cover to strategically take shots at the enemies while avoiding their shots in turn. Generally, cover-based mechanics are only a positive for me when I play TPSs. However, there are many instances in Uprising where the cover-based mechanics aren't done very well. This is most noticeable when the player character pops out of cover for seemingly no reason, without any player input. This of course often leads to a quick and unjust death. There are also certain situations where the cover will be obscenely limited. Sometimes this leads to the enjoyable aforementioned Time Crisis situations, while other times it means you will spend 5 minutes trying to get a beat on a single enemy. That reminds me, the aiming system is flat out broken. It attempts to snap your reticle to the enemy you're aiming at, but oftentimes it fails entirely, overcompensating and making you fight the controls for dominance. Generally, auto-aiming is an interesting tool to help the player aim when they're playing with a controller, which I generally stand by. But in Uprising, you aren't so lucky as to have the auto-aiming help you. The camera spasms so violently when it attempts to auto-aim that player-dependent aiming would have been much more reliable in this case. And no, if you are curious, there is no way to turn off auto-aiming either. When the game's basic TPS mechanics actually work, it can be quite pleasant, and it only gets really messed up during long-range firefights. If you're able to ignore randomly popping out of cover, the obviously terrible camera and aiming issues, and the sometimes heinous cover placement, the game is simple but satisfying. That is, until the RTS minigames show up, and the game becomes a frustrating exercise in escorting very fragile people across the map in a way that depresses me to speak of. Uprising is not unplayable, and it's a solid effort for an indie TPS, but some of the mechanics just plain don't work, and others should have been thoroughly playtested more. Unfortunately, I can't recommend anyone try it like this.